Good evening, good people. Time for another Brews at 10 here on my left eye. I'm your host, Lefty. Thank you very much for joining me this evening. You're all very welcome here. Solidari-Tea. Yes, that's Solidari-Tea. Tea-based puns will be flowing, as well as hot tasty beverages. It's a Wednesday, so that means it's another PMQs. Kit and Octo first in the chat. Great to see you both this evening. How you doing, comrades? Thanks for joining me again. So yes, my initial reaction and analysis and commentary of PMQs. Keith returns, replaced by Deputy Angela Rayner last week. He's back from the G20 summit in Rio, in Brazil, Rio de Janeiro. So Keith will be back at the dispatch box once again. And Mithril, great to see you back again. How you doing? Solidari-Tea. I'll also be talking a little bit about the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire, which prompts me to remind everybody who's watching live to participate in the latest poll. I've been getting into the YouTube polls lately. Second live stream in a row. So this time, simply vote whether you think the Israel-Lebanon ceasefire will last the proposed 60 days. And I guess I'll reveal the results of that either after PMQs and before I talk about that topic, or after I've talked about the topic. I'll make my mind up. Don't want to give any bias influence, you see, in the discussion of the topic. So yeah, we are going to just chill here for a few moments before we get onto those topics, plus a couple other tidbits. I've got a comedy clip lined up. Bit of stand-up this time. From someone who I hope you're familiar with already, but I don't think I've featured on my left eye before. I may have made references to him once or twice, I'm not sure. No spoilers yet though. It's just a short clip from a stand-up for a Palestine fundraiser today actually, so speaking of which, always feel free to throw Palestine flags into the chat. Shows of solidarity. Watermelons, whichever you prefer. And also please do smash that like button and share the stream around your social media. Mithril, I'm glad you're joining me with a cup of Solidari-Tea this evening. I just made a fresh one before I came on stream. Guess I need to wet my whistle whilst I'm interrupting Keith and the cohorts. Of course, we will still have the counter game, Deliver versus Black Hole. For anybody who's listening, if you're not familiar with the game or the rules on that, I'll go into that as we get into PMQs very shortly. And Politics Clive is in the house. Thanks for joining us again. We're going to be jumping into the House of Commons shortly. Like I said, yeah, this is my first time watch, genuine reaction, but I'm imagining the topic of the vote that's taking place tomorrow will come up on at least a couple of occasions. This is the assisted dying bill. The media have poured a great amount of attention over this, so we'll see the result of that tomorrow. I can see that coming up. I'm hoping matters on the ceasefire in Lebanon will come up, but also whether this might possibly lead to a turning ceasefire in Gaza, in Palestine, a lot sooner. We'll see. I'll be going over all of those matters later. What else might be coming up? They might mention the farmers' protest last week. Not sure if that'll come up. That also means Kemi Badenoch's back as well. Thanks for throwing up the flags, watermelons, everybody. Mithril, that's an interesting enterprise. Socialist driving school. I'm formulating a joke as this is happening live. We are live. Something to do with turning left, but then I started to think about the YouTube channel with Curtis and the team. Some sort of pun about turning left. On the lessons, you just go in a square because you just practice how to turn left. And if your student asks if they can turn right, you say hell no. Maybe, just a suggestion. But yeah, I wish you all the best with that, Mithril. Joining me from the northwest, where this stream's coming to you from tonight. Let's just see what's happening with the poll. Thanks a lot for your votes so far. Great stuff, people. Don't forget, brothers and sisters, ladies and gentlemen, smash that thumbs up button. If you're listening back on a replay, let me know what you think about the topics in hand in the comments. I'll try and get back to you. Super thanks are also open if you're watching back on a replay. Get started in just a minute. But of course, time to say thank you very much to all the members on the channel. Thanks for your continued support. Everybody on the list can see some familiar names in the chat too. If you'd like to join this roster of fantastic socialist folk, then please consider supporting the channel with a membership. It's just 99 pence, just one tier of membership, one price for all. Exclusive content, early viewings, etc. to enjoy with the perks. And you also get access to static emojis that you can use during live streams, such as the one that you're watching right now. Alright. I think I'm queued up and ready to go. Politics, Clive, you are correct. We're going to get started with the comedy clip, but it isn't a sitting Labour member. Far from it. Far from it. As you'll get hints of straight away. It's just a small clip. As I said, it's from a fundraiser in support of Palestine. I think it was earlier this evening, actually. So this is hot off the press. Hot as a tasty hot beverage. Okay, so it's Alexis Sale is the comedian in question. This is his bit. Viewers may no doubt remember him from shows such as The Young Ones, the Comic Strip Presents. He also had his own show for a while. I think that was on BBC when it came out originally, so if you're not familiar with him, do check that out. It's great stuff. He is, I believe, if you want to get into the very technicalities of where he stands on the left side of the spectrum as a socialist, I believe he's an open Maoist, and that was part of his upbringing as well. Just a bit about Alexis Sale's political stance. Important for context, you see, so here we go.
Stop the war. It's funny, one of the things about Starmer is people often refer to him as former human rights lawyer, Keir Starmer. I mean, fucking Hitler used to work in a bar. You never hear him referred to as former barman Adolf Hitler. It's what you do now that's significant. So obviously this year has been mostly involved in Palestine. I've been on all the demonstrations, and it's you know, it's been a very difficult year for all of us. But there are other causes that I get involved in. I've always been very heavily involved in animal rights causes. People often criticise animal rights activists. They say, why do you pick on fur rather than leather? And I always say, well, it's much easier to harass an old lady than a biker gang. Typical benefit, you get a laugh about 3 seconds after the gag has to be politically vetted first. Does this contradict any of the writings of Leon Trotsky? No, I don't think it does. Is it racist or sexist? Oh no, I'll laugh. Bit of history of doing benefits there.
Great. A bit of Alexis Sale there. Like I said, just a brief clip. Yeah, you're a fan there, Mithril and Kit in the chat. Yeah, he's great. I think he what was he doing recently? There was a thing on Radio 4, I think, and he was travelling on the train and doing interviews with random passengers and this kind of thing. It was pretty chill vibes. It wasn't very political at all, really. But yeah, great stand-up, great comedian as well. That's Alexis Sale. Ordinal Father, thanks for joining us tonight. Thanks for jumping in the chat as well. I dare say you might be right about the survey there, but I'll save my thoughts on the matter for when we got onto that after PMQs. Okay, I think we'll dive straight in. Lindsay Hoyle warms up his vocal cords. We'll get through the formalities first. Just get the screen lined up, and then I will explain the rules of the game for anyone who's not familiar with Black Hole versus Deliver. Let's cut across. Hope the audio, yep. Looks like the mic's still coming through. Sorry, I've still got that in the back of my mind from the last couple of live streams. It's cut out a couple of times, or appeared to. Looks like it's all good though. JC Vascowood, great to see you back. Solidari-Tea. Okay, people. I'll just quickly go through the rules. It doesn't matter who says either of these phrases. We keep a count of every time someone says either Black Hole or Deliver. And you'll hear that noise whenever you hear Black Hole, or when Postman Twat comes a delivering. Variations on the word are also allowed. Deliver, delivering, delivered, so on. Past, future and present tenses, whatnot. It was a soaring victory for Postman Twat last week. 6-1, I believe. So we'll be keeping count of the score in the top right corner of your screen, as you can see there. And it was quite a late start last week as well. It was 0-0 for a while, and then all of a sudden they were firing them, reeling them off, one after the other. So we'll see what happens. But it's been a bit of a poor show from Black Hole recently. If it does take another trouncing this week, we might have to consider another contender who can take on Postman Twat, perhaps fixing the foundations, as has been suggested by viewers as well. I've got a pretty good idea for the meme for that one, which I won't give away, should it go that way. No spoilers from anybody who's already seen PMQs. This is the first time I've seen it. I've not seen any little clips of it, as you see, going around social media or anything today. Okay, Lindsay, off we go. Are we ready, people? I don't know why they bother. Well, incredibly, again, they start with question number 1.
Thanks goes to all those working tirelessly to support the affected communities. Mr. Speaker, we've committed £2.4 billion over the next 2 years to build, maintain and repair vital defences to protect more communities from the awful impact of the flooding. Mr. Speaker, the ceasefire announced in Lebanon is long overdue, but demonstrates that diplomacy can succeed even in the most challenging of circumstances. We must seize this opportunity to build trust, de-escalate tensions and push for a wider ceasefire.
Don't want to spark off any whataboutery. You you know what I'm going to say to that. It's been around a year since this back and forth escalation between Lebanon and Israel. Every word he just said is applicable to Palestine, but he'll drag his feet on that. Of course he will. Oh, it's quite frustrating. It's quite frustrating.
Mr. Speaker, this morning I had meetings with ministerial colleagues and others, in addition to my duties in this House.
I shall have further such sausages today.
Later today.
Daisy Cooper.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. May I associate myself with those remarks of those of the Prime Minister. West Hertfordshire Hospital Trust has eliminated 65-week waits, and they have now met all 3 national cancer standards. These remarkable achievements by the staff are happening despite the fact that they are working in terrible buildings that are life expired and crumbling. If the government is looking for a project that is high-performing and shovel-ready, this is it. So will the Prime Minister give our trust the green light to build a new hospital without any further delay?
I'm not sure what the 2 ribbons, the red and the white ribbons, though, are representing. If I think I can see a few other MPs wearing them as well. If you're familiar with that, then let me know in the chat. Pardon my ignorance.
We're reviewing to make sure we can deliver. The Health Secretary set out further details, but I'm very happy for her to have a meeting with the relevant minister if she wants to follow up on the specifics. Thank you.
Chris Curtis.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Residents in Red House Park in my constituency
We're doing a fashion watch shortly, of course.
From soaring management fees and poor service from their leaseholder management company. Recent BBC reporting has once again demonstrated the consequences of the outdated and feudal leasehold system. All of them are frustrated by the broken promises of the previous government, so will the Prime Minister reassure them that this government will introduce legislation as soon as possible to resolve the leaseholder and leaseholder crisis?
Mr. Speaker, yes, we will do so. I agree that the last government totally failed to tackle the unfairness of the leasehold system. We will provide homeowners with more powers, protection and greater rights by bringing that legislation forward. Thank you.
Leader of the Opposition, Kemi Bello.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. At the CBI conference on Monday, the Chancellor said, and I quote, "I'm clear, I'm not coming back with more borrowing or more taxes. I know that telling the truth to this House is important to the Prime Minister, so will he repeat his Chancellor's pledge?"
Prince Patel's moved to the other side. Well, they're just getting where they can, I guess. But bit of a clash, though, with the seat behind her. It almost looks as though she's just a floating head moving around. But more on Fashion Watch coming shortly. This is a political channel, I do assure you. I am a sociologist. Right, carry on. I've noticed a few comments regarding outfits as well. Let's just get through a couple of questions and then I'll go over the rest of that. Keep those comments coming as well, people. Thank you very much for those.
Now.
Mr. Speaker, we set out our position at the budget that was just set out. We're fixing the foundations. We're dealing with the £22 billion black hole.
And there's a black hole.
That they left.
Wow.
I'm not going to write the next 5 years of budgets here at this dispatch box.
Ding, ding.
But, Mr. Speaker, we said we wouldn't hit the pay slips of working people. We passed the budget, we invest in the future, and we kept that promise.
Mr. Speaker, he's not fixing any foundations, he's making everything worse. The whole House would have heard him refuse to repeat the Chancellor's pledge, a pledge as worthless as the manifesto promises that he's talking about. If he is fixing foundations, why is it that the PMI index shows that business confidence has crashed since the budget?
Mr. Speaker, we're fixing the foundation. We've got record investment into this country. But she talks about tax rises. Mr. Speaker, 2 weeks ago, she stood there and said that she wanted all the investment, all the benefits of the budget. But she didn't know how she was going to pay for it. I noticed that having come here criticising the national insurance rises over and over again, on Monday she admitted that she wouldn't reverse the position that we set out. Meanwhile, her science minister was saying he was going...
I've pointed out before that the current state of politics in the UK means that two absolutely dire so-called main parties, i.e. Labour and the Tories, are so bad that they throw mud at one another, and a lot of it's actually very valid, and they're just arguing over each other being crap more than progressive policies, shall we say, and that's one of the most frustrating things about PMQs. Now, I've just paused it there because that reminded me of something that Kemi Badenoch came out with earlier on this week. I don't know if this is what Keith's going to be alluding to. So she was saying that, and I'm paraphrasing here, of course, she was saying that Labour were crap. Labour were crap because they're copying what the Tories did. And then she's obviously, you know, how many iterations of the Tories are they going to think that the public are going to vote for, as though they ever do actually change at all. So it's that bad, the state of mainstream politics in the UK, that's what it's led to. It's like, you're rubbish. Well, why are we rubbish? Because you're doing what we did. That's what it's boiled down to. Neoliberalism. Put my teeth in. Just a quick bit of fashion watch before I restart the video. Let's see what you've noticed here. The comments. Gucci. Yeah, the Powell Reeves jacket symmetry is also broken. Thanks for that, Politics Clive. Blue jacket, white shirt, white jacket, blue shirt. Yeah. We've got a sort of reverse combo thing going on, ish. All with the blue jackets. Because they all want to be like bloody Thatcher, don't they?
Energetically to do the opposite. They really haven't got a clue what they're doing.
Mr. Speaker, if he wants to know what Conservatives would do, he should resign and find out. Until then...
Thank you, Odin Allfather, for the clarity on the ribbons. The red ribbon is for AIDS awareness, and the white is possibly anti-violence against women, but there's a few different meanings for them, aren't there? Yeah. Okay, thanks for the clarity there.
I'll decide when there's more.
Mr. Speaker, until then, I'm the one asking the questions. There's a petition out there, 2 million people asking him to go. He's the one who doesn't know. He's the one who doesn't know how things work. It is not government that creates growth, Mr. Speaker. It is business. His employment secretary, I don't see her here, she wants more young people in work. But businesses say they are cutting jobs because of the Chancellor's budget. His Deputy Prime Minister, she is not here. Her employment rights bill will stop businesses hiring. That's what they say.
Just want to
the CBI said on Monday that the dots of the government's policy
disabled,
don't
for people
join
on
up.
incapacity
They're
benefits
right,
who can't
they?
work.
Mr. Speaker, on Monday she said that she wouldn't reverse the increase in national insurance. Yesterday, on their legacy legislation, their predecessor, they couldn't decide what their position was. Today, they've launched a policy commission asking other people to give them some ideas for government. And she talks about a petition. We had a massive petition on the 4th of July in this country. We spent years suggests taking our party from a party of protest to a party of government, they're hurtling in the opposite direction.
What a load of nonsense, Mr. Speaker. We had a budget in March this year, and tractors were not blockading the streets of Whitehall afterwards. So let me give him another example of a real business. Another example of a real business. Following his budget, the head of McVitie's has said that it has been harder to understand what the case for investment in the UK is. So while the Prime Minister has been hobnobbing in Brazil, businesses have been struggling to digest his budget.
Oh no, they're doing
Speaker,
biscuit
that the Employment
jokes
Rights
now.
Bill shows that it is not only the ginger nut that is causing him problems.
I was attending the G20. I suspect on their current trajectory, they don't know whether they're going to attend the G20 or not. Maybe the Policy Commission will come up with an answer on that one. But we've had record...
Don't worry, people, your tea-based puns are far superior to this trash.
She says at this dispatch box, she wants all the benefits of the budget, all the investment, but she doesn't want to pay for any of it. Mr. Speaker, she's racked up £6.7 billion of unfunded commitments in just 3 weeks as leader of the opposition. So once the cabinet of the economy, we're the ones growing the economy.
Mr. Speaker, the investment he's taking credit for was our work. I was business secretary. We negotiated those deals that he announced. But the bottom line is that in all that he has said, he doesn't seem to care about the young people who will lose their jobs as a result of his budget. Perhaps he can show more concern for the 1,100 people who found out yesterday that they could lose their jobs at Vauxhall's plant in Luton. So while he flies around making unilateral commitments, back home, the real-world effects are businesses closing in Bedfordshire and Bath. Does the Prime Minister stand by his promise to ban the sale
we're
of
committed
cars by 2030,
to so many EV cars by 2030, so they're going to have to stop selling them anyway.
I wouldn't normally invite a heckle, but that one was accurate. Mr. Speaker, the question of the position of jobs in Luton is a very serious one, and families and workers will be very worried, and we are obviously engaging with them. I would remind the Leader of the Opposition that the EV mandates that are an issue in this particular case...
I hate to agree with Keith on that, but it's true. That's the scenario.
I would also remind her that she was the business secretary that introduced them. We're getting on with supporting those communities. She's shouting from the sideline.
Mr. Speaker, he clearly didn't read his briefing about the EV mandate. The fact is, we changed the date and made it easier for people. Everything he has done is attack people. The budget was an attack on farmers, an attack on workers, an attack on pensioners, an attack on the young, and an attack on thousands of charities and businesses across the country. The whole system is broken, Mr. Speaker, and he is making things worse. He is making things worse.
Take care, Matthew. We'll see you soon.
Mr. Speaker, he is making things worse. Everyone is unhappy. Isn't it a good thing that the Chancellor is an expert at customer complaints?
Mr. Speaker, I think she's just read out the charge sheet against the last government. Everything is broken. And they come here every week with absolutely nothing to offer except complaints. Nothing constructive, no new ideas. They don't know what they're doing.
You're copying their ideas, and you give them a stick to beat you with. And then half of the time, yeah, you're trying to take credit for things that the Tories did, whilst trying to criticise them and saying that you're different and that you brought real change. It's absolutely fucked up beyond measure.
Last week of Islamophobia Awareness Month, the Prime Minister will know that this year has been an extraordinarily difficult for British Muslims on the receiving end of society's most deplorable attitudes, considered easy prey for the far right and scapegoated by politicians endorsing institutional Islamophobia. And the reality is this emboldening and normalisation of Islamophobia as highlighted in a number of reports, led to the race riots we saw on the streets of Britain this summer, where mosques and those who are visibly Muslim were subject to despicable attacks.
Yeah, quite right. And if Keith wants to know about Islamophobia, then he can get on the phone to his mate Ben, can't he?
Many left fearing for their
He's a world
lives.
leader.
So will
in
the
the
Prime Minister
field of
condemn
racism,
those in public office and positions of power who
so to
actively
speak?
promote Islamophobia? Will he commit to adopting a definition today, and will he further outline what concrete steps the government is taking to rip out Islamophobia at its roots, including in this place?
Mr. Speaker, he's right to raise Islamophobia, and there's been a concerning rise in Islamophobia.
You cretinous
and
hypocrites,
antisemitism
Keith.
over recent
You
months,
cretinous
and
hypocrites.
We are committed to
You've
tackling
aided
all forms of hatred.
and
We will
abetted
work with others on an ongoing basis
a
to make
racist
sure that we do.
ideology,
Thank you.
i.e. Zionism.
Leader of the Liberal Democrats, Red Davies.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Can I associate myself with the Prime Minister's remarks about the terrible impact
And an
of Storm
international
Bert
war
with
criminal,
all the
by
flooding?
the way.
Our thoughts are with all those affected, with thanks to our amazing emergency services. Mr. Speaker, Christine's father was told that he needed end-of-life care, but after a few days it was removed due to funding cuts. He was told that he wouldn't get it, and he died a few weeks later.
Hey, Super Tiny, great to see you again. Hope you're well.
Said it was terrible to watch him.
Thanks for joining us. Solidari-Tea.
Does the Prime Minister agree that whatever the House decides on Friday, it is urgent to improve access to high-quality end-of-life care? And will he make that a key focus of the 10-year NHS plan? And will he commit now to protect hospices from the national insurance rise?
I thank you for raising that case, and I think the thoughts of the whole House.
Oh, sorry, I said earlier that the vote was tomorrow. It's on Friday, of course. Apologies.
Mr. Speaker, obviously there's a very important vote on Friday, but whichever way that vote goes, we must invest properly in care across our health
Great to
service.
see
So
Floor
that's
Snake
why,
as well. Hope you're doing well.
In addition to putting the NHS
Thanks for
back on
throwing
its
up the
feet,
watermelon.
we're
Solidarity.
putting forward a 10-year plan to make sure the NHS can give the care that everybody would expect across the spectrum, including end-of-life care.
Sir Ed Davies.
And Morbius as well.
The Prime Minister for that reply, and I hope we'll hear more from ministers, particularly on hospices and national insurance, in days to come. Turning to the cost of living crisis, on Friday, Ofgem said that in January,
poverty, Ed.
energy
Just
bills
say
would
poverty.
go up again after last month's 10% rise. Millions of people are really worried about how they're going to make ends meet this winter, not least hundreds of thousands of pensioners who are in poverty but above the pension credit limit, who will now lose winter fuel payments. So with energy bills going up again, will the Prime Minister reconsider and restore winter fuel payments?
Bully balls.
Mr. Speaker, obviously the whole House is concerned about energy bills,
Keith
which
isn't
are
for
actually
turning.
lower this year than they were
You know what I
last
mean?
year. The long-term way to deal with this
You know what I mean?
is clean power by 2030 to make sure we drive those energy bills down on a permanent basis. And that's what we will do. On the winter fuel allowance, he knows very well what the
Now that he's in, he won't be doing any U-turns on policy that he's enacted. He'll only do U-turns on things that he's promised in the past, manifesto promises, pledges. What was the other latest one? 6 first steps, was it? When was the last time you heard anything about that one? Again, and now it's fixing the foundations. So this series of promises that he's made to slime his way up the career ladder to land himself on that side of the dispatch box will all be reneged upon. Any progressive socialist policies. Promises not to cut winter fuel payments, promises to abolish student fees. He's actually increased them. 2-child benefit cap. The list goes on. So no, you won't. So I think that's a bit of a wasted question from Ed Davey. Obviously, he deserves to be scrutinised for that decision, but that's not going to go through the Commons again. There's no way to appeal to Keith's sense of morality because he doesn't have one. He's a careerist, ideologist, lying fantasist.
The government's position is, and I've rehearsed it, indeed with him many times.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Antisocial behaviour involving modified and off-road bikes is a menace that has a huge impact on communities like mine in Sunderland. While I welcome the work Northumbria Police do in partnership with our council on this issue, they need stronger powers and more resources. Can the Prime
I think that was Hilary Benn, and yes, the apple's fallen far from the tree politically, where he's concerned. His father, the late great Tony Benn, of course, fantastic socialist, but Hillary's firmly in the neoliberal camp, unfortunately.
Affects so many people. Sometimes it's described to me as low level. It isn't in the impact it has, particularly when it comes to off-road bikes. And that's why we're implementing tough new respect orders, which will give powers to the police, including powers to seize off-road bikes, but crucially adds a power of arrest for breach of the orders, something that's been missing in recent years. So we will tackle this because it blights communities across the country.
Stephen Flynn.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. As everyone in the House will be aware, we're currently in the middle of BBC Anti-Scam Awareness Week. And of course,
I was wondering whether the mention of Sunderland might trigger the rivalry in the chat. When I was talking about the ribbons earlier, I wasn't going to ask if they were all Sunderland fans, tongue in cheek, of course, for risk of setting it off. But there you go. There you go.
advice in that context is always simple. If you see a scam, you should report it. So with that in mind, can the Prime Minister advise the House? Is he aware of anyone who's promised to reduce energy bills only for them?
Sorry to interrupt, Stephen. I just want
BBC anti-scam
rewind
awareness
a little bit just to get the full question
but
again.
Crucially, adds a power of arrest for breach of the orders. Something's been missing in recent.
There's another great clip of Stephen Flynn. I might play it after PMQs in another session in HLC. I'll get onto as well. Good point as well, Super Tiny in the chat. Let's fight climate change by banning e-bikes. The thing with them was to come up with suitable legislation. Obviously, they're fairly new, but they're technically not legal. So there you go. But that's definitely not gonna help the problem.
Yes. So we will tackle this because it blights communities across the country.
Still 1-1 on the scores, by the way.
Mr. Speaker, as everyone in the House will be aware, we're currently in the middle of BBC Anti-Scam Awareness Week. And of course, the advice in that context is always simple. If you see a scam, you should report it. So with that in mind, can the Prime Minister advise the House? Is he aware of anyone who's promised to reduce energy bills only for them to increase? Is he aware of anyone who promised to back business only to tax business? And is he aware of anyone who promised to protect pensioners only to pick their pockets for their winter fuel allowance?
Well, it's very good to see.
Really well put from Stephen Flynn. Yeah, Keith's actually set up a charity, and this is a joke, by the way, just to be very clear, terms of service, YouTube, etc. He's set up a charity, and you can make a check out to make a donation to the Community Association of Social Housing, or if you can't fit that on the check, just put the acronym and you can email that to Keith straight away. That's the Community Association of Social Housing. Just put the acronym if you like, for who to pay on the cheque, and it's all good. It's all good. But what's this? It looks like someone's bellowed something out from the back benches. Keith's rubbernecking there. What's going on? That was good from Stephen Flynn about the scams, though.
Sorry. The gallery will not clap and not interrupt the proceedings. Prime Minister.
Oh, someone claps.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad to see him in his seat in this House as
protect pensioners only to pick their pockets for their winter fuel allowance.
well, it's very good to see.
Sorry. The gallery will not clap and not interrupt the proceedings. Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I'm very glad.
The gallery is supposed to be passive, of course, and there's supposed to be no clapping in the House of Commons, barring a few exceptions. They've clapped for far-right fascists before in the House of Commons, of course. They clapped for Zelensky, too. Just a couple of exceptions. There is another example, but that'll lead me down an absolute rabbit hole. I'm not even going there. But that's the formality, isn't it?
To see him in his seat in this
no
House,
good jokes unless you're
I'm sure
Stephen
many
Flynn.
of his colleagues in Scotland share that sentiment. What I can point to is a government in Scotland that promised to take Scotland forward and took them backwards. So I can identify the first one. It's right
You're
there.
getting trashed in Scotland in the next election, Keith. Absolutely trashed.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. November marks Islamophobia Awareness Month. Last year, the United Nations Human Rights Council adopted a resolution condemning the desecration of religious texts, including the Quran, despite opposition from the previous government. Acts of such mindless desecration only serve to fuel division and hatred within our society. Will the Prime Minister commit to introducing measures to prohibit the desecration of all religious texts and the prophets of the Abrahamic religions?
So he's referring to the Abrahamic religions being Islam, Judaism and Christianity. Of course, the burning of the respective Bibles, the Bible, the Torah and the Quran, would be prohibited. I'd like to know what you think about that in the chat as well. There's obviously issues of freedom of expression within there, but you can also argue that that is done in most cases purely to stir up racial hatred and to intimidate the religion whose text that you're desecrating. So those are more or less the two sides of the argument. Let me know whether you approve or disapprove of that. I think Keith's going to be supportive of that suggestion in his response, just to predict Mr. Predictable.
Can I agree with him that desecration is awful and I think should be condemned across the House? We are, as I said before, Mr. Speaker, committed to tackling all forms of hatred and division, including, of course, Islamophobia in all of its forms. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Sarah and her family have farmed beef and cattle in my Gordon and Buchan constituency for over 70 years, and they'd always planned for her sister to continue the family legacy. Earlier this year, Sarah's mother died very suddenly and unexpectedly, and she was just 58. Sarah said to me that despite already having a tragic year, it was made even worse after the budget, saying that changes to agricultural property relief has hit us hard when we're already struggling with bereavement and trying to cope with losing mum. What would the Prime Minister say to Sarah and her family on what has been the most difficult year of their lives, in light as well of the family farm tax?
Prime Minister.
The thing is, and obviously, you know, condolences in that regard, but the fact of the matter is it's only the wealthier farmers who would be affected by that budget change. Not that I'm one to rush to defend Rachel Reeves or Keir Starmer, believe me. But this whole farmers' protest has pretty much been overblown. And when it comes to the inheritance controversy, as it were, it is only those wealthier farmers who are handing over millions of pounds worth of assets who will have to pay a fraction of that, not all farm owners. And I think I saw a stat recently that the average value of a farm is actually only in the tens of thousands of pounds, given that there's a broad range of, you know, sizes of what constitutes a farm.
Mr. Speaker, I'm grateful to her for raising the case and the awful bereavement. And if she would kindly send me the details of the case, then I'll certainly have a look at it. In relation to farming more broadly, as she knows, £5 billion was set aside in the budget over the next 2 years as an investment in farming. That's the biggest amount that's ever been set aside. I hear the chuntering, but they actually failed to spend the last farming budget by £300 million. On the question of inheritance and family farms, obviously it's important to bear in mind in a typical case, which is parents passing to a child, the threshold is £3 million, and that is why, as she knows, the vast majority of farms will be totally unaffected.
Neil Coyle.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Southwark
faces
true.
a significant challenge of antisocial behaviour, but fewer police today than in 2010 due to Tory cuts in coalition with the Lib Dems. As the Prime Minister fixes the postcode lottery in law and order, will he consider the request from Southwark Police, Southwark Council and myself for our community to be a pilot test area for the new respect orders to address this serious problem?
Well, I'm grateful for him for raising this.
Of course, the topic of religion came up. I could see we do have Odin Allfather in the chats, of course. But you're keeping it all nice and polite there. That's a non-Abrahamic deity that we have there.
Has been badly eroded under the last government, and we will drive that up with a major programme of reform. That includes recruiting 13,000 more police into neighbourhood policing and the tough new respect orders, coupled with the power to arrest for breach of the order.
Rupert now.
It takes years to train police. It's the same with nurses. You don't just flick a switch and a conveyor belt comes and it has all of the staffing solutions that you need for the emergency services, you know, just coming off on a production line. It's not the way. Obviously, it's good to be ambitious to raise the numbers, but to hint or suggest that things like that can just happen in an instant. The same with the economy. It's ludicrous. It's a nonsense. But the Tories did cut thousands of police, of course. And if you rush through those kind of things where training's concerned, then you end up with poorer quality. And let's say that the Met, for example, and certain forces have a reputation for certain nefarious cultures at the moment. And that's what breeds into that.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I sincerely hope that all of us in this House agree that good government is transparent government. In response to my written question on publishing the number of foreign nationals receiving universal credit, I was informed by a department...
Not saying you have to be low to be a member of the Reform Party, but here's Rupert's.
Developing suitable official statistics was being examined. Will the Prime Minister today commit to using his good offices to publish this data transparently?
Yeah. Well, I'm grateful to him for raising this, and I know there's been an exchange on it, and as soon as I've got an update for him, I will provide that for him.
Ian McKenna, great to see you back in the chat. A very interesting way of doing your shopping there.
The government delivered for the mine workers in the mine workers pension scheme. So it was so well received and it was justice done. However, is it not time to seek the truth with regards to the policing during the miners' strike? And would the Prime Minister commit to an early and full inquiry into the policing during the miners' strike, something which this lot denied for generations?
Well, I'm grateful for him for raising this.
Super tiny, take care, catch you next time.
Pension scheme reversed a historic injustice.
Solidarity.
I'm so pleased we're able to do that in the budget. In relation to the miners' strike, as I think he knows, I've met some of the Orgreave campaigners and listened very carefully to what they say. They are entitled to the truth, and we're thinking carefully about what the next step should be in order to deliver that for them.
Member of Portugal.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Next month marks 2 years since the death of Cody Fisher, a young man from my constituency of Stratford-on-Avon. Cody was a talented footballer with a bright future whose life was tragically cut short when he was stabbed in a nightclub in Birmingham. His mother, Tracy, has been campaigning tirelessly in his memory for legislation which would require venues to wear bleed kits and metal detectors. In the light of the government's commitment to tackling knife crime, will the Prime Minister meet with Tracy and me to discuss these vital proposals to better protect young people like Cody from the devastating impact of knife crime?
Prime Minister.
Well, I thank the honourable member for raising the tragic case and pay tribute to Tracy for her campaigning. I've met a number of families on this issue of bleed kits, so I know firsthand just how important it is. We are taking measures in relation to knife crime, which includes banning the sale of online knives, making them less available, of course to take young people out of offending where we can, and real penalties. But I am happy to look at bleed kits, and I will make sure that she gets a meeting with the relevant minister to hear more of what we're doing, but also to make her case.
Rachel Hopkins.
Mr. Speaker, and I refer to my register of interests. The proposed closure of Luton's Vauxhall van plant by Stellantis is devastating news for our town. Over 1,000 jobs at risk and the future prosperity of our town threatened. So can the Prime Minister...
Well, here's the thing. When you base your entire economy on a finite resource, this is bound to happen sooner or later. And things such as phasing out of petrol and diesel vehicles has to happen, and that's the situation. If your gripe, Rachel Hopkins, is with capitalism in general, because that's what it's led to, and if towns, people's livelihoods rely upon it, then it's an empire built on sand, and it's all going to come crashing down eventually. These are those times, and those commitments have to be met. And if Vauxhall don't want to do their duty and encourage electric vehicle use and promote it, then that's the way it goes. You've got to, this is what's happening.
To assure me there will be cross-departmental response to support the automotive sector.
However, sorry, I just want to quickly add though, where that's concerned as well, I don't think that in any move to renewable energy or any other policies that are better for the environment, that it should cost any jobs. People should be able to easily transition from the industry that's being phased out into the newer industries without the loss of a single job or livelihood. I totally back that. People can retrain, reskill themselves, and yes, some of them have been doing it for the whole lives. It's all that they know, but it's a necessity, especially where the conservation of the planet's concerned, and how short a time we have to turn things around and try and stay under the global temperature limits, which I've mentioned quite a few times. I won't prattle on about, but I do support the re-employment of anybody who might lose the jobs because of transitions, of course.
Importantly, good skilled jobs in Luton.
Yes, I will, and I know, and thank her for raising this, because it is a difficult and uncertain time for workers in Luton and her constituents and their families. And that's why we're working with the industry. There will in fact be a statement later on today, Mr. Speaker, about this. It's important we do whatever we can to support these communities.
Then Harriet Baldwin.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Tenbury Wells was flooded again with Storm Bert last weekend. The second time the town has been flooded this year, and it's a town where it's only a case of when, not if, it will flood again. And the situation is made even more devastating for residents because there is a fully developed flood defence plan that is partly funded for the town.
You're coming through clear on the chat there, Floor Snake, if you're having some technical problems. Anybody else? Please do let me know. But yeah, you're coming through in the chat there, Floor Snake.
And the budget carried forward 2.4 billion for flood defences. Can the Prime Minister commit to be able to use his offices to finally get this scheme built and to fix the foundations of Tenbury Wells?
Well, I'm grateful to her for raising this, which is an awful situation.
I'll use some of the footage of Tenbury Wells in my last video for anybody who's seen that, compared it to scenes in Valencia in Spain.
Damage, including problems then of insurance, etc., that then prevail for many, many years. We are committed to tackling this. That's why
when you've had Environment Secretaries such as Theresa May, who blame floods on wind coming in from the wrong direction, though it's hardly a wonder that this happens.
It's such an important issue.
Smith.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Last weekend in Cwmtaleiri, torrential rain caused a landslip. Slurry, even boulders, poured down streets. People were afraid. The Chancellor just agreed a welcome £25 million for coal tip maintenance in Wales. Given the impact of extreme weather events, will the Prime Minister continue to prioritise coal tips to keep our communities safe?
Yes, I will, and I know how much of a concern it is to his constituents. Indeed, we went together to meet some of those constituents last time there was terrible flooding, but that commitment to the £25 million in relation to coal tips is very important. And what I would say on flooding, we've now had two questions on this. If other members of the House do have individual issues they're not able to raise here, if they get in touch with myself or my office, I'll make sure that they get whatever they need in support of their constituents.
Also, Keith, what doesn't help the situation is offshore drilling in the North Sea. Projects such as Rosebank, which aren't going to solve energy problems of today. They're not going to be going online for perhaps 2 decades. Okay? You need to seriously, quickly, properly invest in renewables and the UK wind and tidal, but that's not helping.
O'Hara.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker, and of course we too welcome the
Ian, it's coal tips, TIPS-P. That's Papa Tango Indigo Papa Sierra. Not what you said.
Fire in Lebanon. But now that arrest warrants have been issued for his allies, Netanyahu and Gallant, the Prime Minister's determination to supply Israel with the weapons it requires to carry out its atrocities in Gaza, which has always been morally repugnant, is now completely untenable. But what these warrants would do is present him with a perfectly valid legal avenue by which he can end the UK's complicity in this slaughter. So will he do that, or will the Prime Minister continue to choose to licence F-35 components to a regime which is now led by a man wanted for war crimes and crimes against humanity?
Banter rights there, Keith.
We've set out our position under the current law, as he well knows. I've set out my position very, very clearly in relation to the sale of capability to Israel to defend itself against attacks such as...
Piss off! They're not defending themselves, they are the oppressors. It is Palestine who are defending themselves, and by the way, they're actually allowed by law to defend themselves by any means. It's completely flipped on its head. And what you have not given clarity about is whether Netanyahu would be arrested should he set foot on the shores of the UK. That's something that you failed to do as well, Keith. Been as clear as mud. We can't continue to sell them F-35 parts and still claim to be not complicit in these horrific crimes, which Netanyahu's got an arrest warrant for. Get real, Keith.
As those from Iran, and I'm very clear that we'll continue to do so.
Catherine Atkinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Derby City Centre is turning the page on 14 years of Conservative decline. With a new performance venue, a new business school and restored market hall. But across the country, we see
Dr. Davies, great to see you again.
Too many empty shops
Thanks for joining
and
us
quiet high streets. This budget is putting more money into the pockets of working people to spend supporting local businesses. Will the Prime Minister commit, contrary to Conservative scaremongering, to support and protect small businesses that are the beating heart of our high streets?
That was Planted Question of the Week you were watching there. More brown nosery to come in future weeks. And this week's winner was Catherine Atkinson of Derby North.
They can chunter all they like. She's describing their legacy. She's describing their legacy. We are turning that around. We're supporting small businesses. We're supporting the high street. We're rebuilding our country as they go backwards.
David Reid.
Well, I thought we'd get to deliver that.
My constituents in Exmouth and Exeter East and our neighbours across the southwest are understandably concerned about the rail disruption and potential economic damage that the HS2 construction at Old Oak Common will cause to our region for at least the next 7 years. So will the Prime Minister please commit to producing a full mitigation plan as soon as possible to address these issues and to ensure that the South West does not lose out?
Prime Minister. I'm grateful to him for raising the issue, which is of real importance to his constituents, and we have committed £30 million to mitigate the impact of the construction at Old Oak Common. Local services will be unaffected, and current plans will see services run between Exeter and London Euston. But I'm very happy again to arrange a meeting with the relevant minister if he wants that, in order to follow up on the particular concern of his constituents.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After 14 years of the Tories, our criminal justice system is on its knees, leaving just 4.4 of domestic assault cases recorded by the police, resulting in a conviction. With Monday just gone being the International Day of the Elimination of Violence Against Women, can the Prime Minister tell us what he's going to do to ensure the criminal justice system works for women and girls in North West Leicestershire and beyond?
Well, she's right to say the criminal justice system was broken by the last government, like everything else that they touched in the 14 years. Mr. Speaker, we take this extremely seriously. We've made a commitment to halving violence against women and girls. We're taking a number of measures in relation to that, piloting, for example, domestic abuse protection orders and making it clear...
throwaway promises, you'll reduce this by 50%, he's saying, or in other areas they'll increase whatever by whatever. And you can't just do that like you've got a magic wand and it will happen. You can't commit. I mean, obviously, this is appalling that only 4% of cases result in convictions. But you can't make throwaway statements like that, Keith, just because you think it sounds good.
We will introduce a standalone offence of spiking. These are some of the measures which, frankly, we ought to be able to work across the House on, because the issue is of such importance.
Matt Weston.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Ukraine faces a hell of a battle on its eastern front with Russia, but on the home front, the challenge is just as great. Just facing a harsh winter, just last week it was reported that 80% of its energy infrastructure...
Well, we've just given them a shitload of weapons, that is Ukraine, to fire at Russia. We could have a nuclear winter at this rate.
The Prime Minister agreed to meet with me to discuss the provision of energy aid to this important ally, Ukraine.
Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, we have provided support. This is a very serious issue, £370 million of support to the energy sector in Ukraine, which is being targeted by the Russian strikes. I will ensure that he gets a meeting with the relevant minister, and I'm pleased that on this issue there is unity across the House in our defence.
Give over. It was America who blew up the Nord 2 pipeline. Do you think we've all forgotten about that? Jesus, the double standards. It's through the roof.
Of Ukraine in the face of Russia's aggression.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. After years of neglect under the previous Conservative government, GP surgeries and across North East Hampshire they are preparing now for huge bills to pay increased employer national insurance contributions. Heart Health Partnership in Fleet estimates this will cost them 3 nursing salaries and have already reduced staff hours by 50 per week, with more cuts in January. Can the Prime Minister please tell GPs in my constituency which patient services they should cut in order to pay the bills?
Mr. Speaker, she's absolutely right that the NHS was broken by the last administration. And the Darcy report makes that absolute... They should hang their heads in shame, frankly. We are providing in the budget £22 billion of additional funding this year for our NHS. That's a huge investment in our NHS, which is much welcomed across the NHS, much needed across the NHS. We will, of course, work with GPs and consult the sector on the services they provide.
How much of that's going to go
the money
to
that they're entitled to
private
in
healthcare
return.
companies,
And
Keith?
all of that funding
Wes?
will be confirmed in the usual way.
Johnny Maynard.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. We recognise that Labour is determined to defend the economically disastrous Conservative policies of being outside the customs union and single market. However, does the Prime Minister agree with the principle that where it is in our country's interest to maintain alignment with EU standards so we can better sell our products internationally, we align, and where it is in our interest to diverge, we diverge?
Well put simply, here's a direct quote from Starmer. He says that the UK won't rejoin the EU in his lifetime. That's pretty much what he's... Is that a dog? There's... Oh, of course, yeah. It's a guide dog. Apologies. I just noticed the dog's having a bit of a nap there on the chamber floor. Andy Carter, great to see you again. Welcome to the chat. But that's Starmer's stance on the EU. We all know he only changed it so he could make a political move against Corbyn when Labour were in opposition under his leadership in 2019. So he'll just, it just uses the EU for whatever political means he wants to. He's not going to commit to rejoining.
I certainly agree that the deal we got under the last government is not the best deal that we can get, and that's why we're determined to reset the relationship, which we have already begun. Obviously, there'll be no return to freedom of movement, the customs union or the single market, but beyond that, we can increase, I think, and improve the situation, whether it comes to trading, to security.
No, that's the fundamental thing about the European Union, is it allows us to trade quickly and cheaply with our 27 closest neighbours. Fundamentally, Keith, that's what the major detrimental thing about leaving the EU was all about. Unless you're so far and beyond that you've got this sense of exceptionalism that they'll make a special case for us because you still think that we run the world.
And other cooperation, and we're actively working on that.
Final question, Frank McNally.
Very much, Mr. Speaker. Following a major fire at the Taidgh depot in my constituency in 2021, Scotland's clinical waste was forced to be transported to England due to a complete lack of forward planning. Taidgh was only appointed after the previous contractor collapsed, leaving human remains languishing in a warehouse, and it's now been revealed that the Spanish company was bailed out with £5.4 million of taxpayers' money. Does the Prime Minister agree with me that the SNP government has consistently failed to get a grip of clinical waste disposal and must act appropriately to protect the public purse and ensure public safety?
Well, I do agree with that, and it's not. It's the rule rather than exception when it comes to the SNP government. And the challenge for them now is they've got the powers to act. They've now been given the money to act. They've run out of excuses.
That completes Prime Minister's question.
It's finished with a draw. It's 1-1. It's 1-1. That concludes PMQs. Just bring in the music. So I guess the result of that is Blackhall, I guess, will survive for another week, having a 1-1 draw. If it had been another Trenton, I think that would have had to have been in. Well, yeah, they came very close together. Then that was it. Some of the predicted topics I mentioned at the start came up. The farmers' protest, the assisted dying vote that's coming up on Friday, as well as Lebanon and Palestine as well. Pretty averagely poor performance there from Keith, as expected. My thoughts about the current state of politics itself just go to show, and look at what we've got now. Highlights. Obviously Stephen Flynn's thing about the scam, the BBC scam show. I thought that was pretty good. Flo's take, does the guide dog do political guidance? I'm not sure, but could probably do a much better job than a lot of the current occupants of the House of Commons. Just quickly skimming through the chat as well, and there's been more votes on the poll. I'll be revealing the results of that very shortly. So what did you make of this week's PMQs? Please do let me know in the comments if you're watching back on a replay. Just get rid of the old scoreboard there. Before I move on, please do also make sure that you've hit the thumbs up button on the stream. Give us a share across your social media platforms, so on and so forth. Still deliberating whether to open a Blue Sky account. That would have to be instead of a Twitter account. I know there's been an ongoing mass exodus. But in the meantime, if you do want to follow us on that there Twitter, the handle is @MyLeftEyeUK. Also on Mastodon, @MyLeftEye, with capitals at the start of each word there. Yeah, and do hit the notification bell if you want to keep up with all the content. We're going to move on to the Lebanon ceasefire. And I'll be revealing the poll in just a moment, like I said. Oh, it looks like we've got a raid from Helena at No Justice. Thanks to everybody who's joining us over from No Justice. That's No Justice MTG. Solidari-Tea. Thanks again. Shout out to Helena. Great stuff for anybody who's watching, not familiar with that channel. Please do go over and check it out. Highly recommended. Yeah, anyone who's not familiar with My Left Eye, this is the Brews at 10. Weekday live streams. We've just been going over PMQs. Going to get onto the Lebanon ceasefire in just a moment. If you're not familiar with the channel, we're a socialist channel all about politics and society. I'm your host Lefty. Great to see you here this evening. Right, so on that topic, I'll just bring up an article. And then I shall reveal the result of the poll. Which I'll just leave for, actually, because we've just had a raid, I'll give a chance for people joining us from No Justice, if they'd like to vote in the poll, the chance to do so. So just queue up this article. So yeah, the ceasefire was announced yesterday. Proposed 60-day ceasefire. If it does last, you know, could just be a sort of sticking plaster solution. But let's reveal the poll before I just dive into this article even. Okay, has everybody voted? Just about to end the poll. It's a lot closer than the last one. 83 to 17 in favour of no. So you don't think that the ceasefire will last 60 days by 87% to 83% to 17. I should say. Can you see the result in the chat? There it is. Took a second to come up there. 83 to 16. And I'd have to agree with that. Purely based on reputation, we know what Israel are like. Immediately after the ceasefire was announced, Netanyahu went on another diatribe on TV. I was listening to that live as it came through when that was announced, and trying to throw so many caveats at that. We know his obvious reputation from Gaza, so should any weapon at all be sighted within the entire country of Lebanon, you'll see Netanyahu using that as an abysmal excuse to launch further attacks. In fact, as the ceasefire was being announced yesterday, there was still smouldering rubble in Beirut, where residential blocks had just been attacked. And 3,800 people have been confirmed killed in Lebanon since these escalations, and 1 million people have been displaced as well. But in that diatribe I mentioned, he talked about Hamas more than he did Hezbollah. He talked about Palestine more than he did Lebanon. He's trying to say that this will now enable him to focus on removing Hamas. He's also made some other demands, such as that Hezbollah completely disband. Obviously, he's doing the same for Hamas, but these are just ideological delusions, really. Given what Israel's done to both countries, you can't expect them to sit there without having an army or some sort of international enforcement agency to replace Hezbollah and Hamas respectively. Otherwise, they're just going to be sitting ducks for the Zionist far-right ideological maniacs. It's only day one of the ceasefire, but it does appear to be upholding. I saw a couple of posts on social media earlier claiming that there have been attacks today since the ceasefire was agreed. However, I couldn't get any clarity on the sources of those, so don't want to jump the gun and say that they've already been broken. You're right there, Doc Davies. Netanyahu definitely has his sights set on southern Lebanon, as he does probably the entirety of Lebanon. He certainly does the entirety of Palestine. During the aforementioned diatribe, he also referred to areas of Palestine under the Israeli name for them, not the actual Palestinian name. He referred to Samaria, Judea, these kind of non-existent areas that only exist in his fascist head. So as for how many days this would last before Israel come up with some pathetic excuse to launch further attacks, who knows? Who knows? But I certainly agree with the results of the poll. Thank you very much for all of your votes there. Let's see if there's been any updates with the developing story. Obviously, a large amount of people who were displaced are now trying to return to southern Lebanon. You can see there some of the scenes of devastation in the aftermath of it all. 60,000 civilians evacuated further south. That's a lot of people. And obviously a lot of people are returning to find that the homes have been razed to the ground. We've seen so-called bunker buster bombs that have levelled entire residential areas to nothing, to ash and dust. You don't use that kind of weaponry to seek out who you describe as terrorists, do you? There's still the ongoing matter of Iran, of course, as this article points out. Just skim over a bit of this. It says, just like Hezbollah's surviving leaders, their patrons in Iran also wanted a ceasefire. Hezbollah needs a pause to lick its wounds, and Iran needs to stop the geostrategic bleeding. Its axis of resistance is no longer a deterrent. Iran's missile attack on Iran after Nasrallah's assassination did not repair the damage. There's been speculation over when the next big attack on Iran might come from Israel, or whether there'll be another large-scale retaliatory attack from Iran, who've taken out lots of military infrastructure in Israel as well. That's why they had to go cap in hand to the States for anti-missile equipment, etc. Yeah, that's a good point, Odin. Allfather, just when you go up to the map there, you can see obviously Lebanon, Syria, Jordan, there's the Mediterranean Sea, Israel, and then Gaza. They refer to an area of Palestine, they don't refer to Palestine on the map. Also, there's the West Bank on the other side, roughly this area here. And then there's Gaza, very small strip of the country, but originally home to 2 million people. Of course, a lot of those are displaced now, trapped in the north. And that's been absolutely razed to the ground as well. Unfortunately, I do see the rate of violence in Palestine increasing now that the IDF aren't operating in Lebanon. But that's a good point, Odin. Bit of BBC bias there, perhaps, along with all the times when they interrupt whoever they're speaking to say, oh, well, this is what Israel would say. So do the BBC represent Israel? If they wanted that opinion, then they should invite an Israeli on. Another analogy, if they're reporting on, let's say, a stabbing in South London, for example, and the victims' families were appearing on BBC News, so I'm not making light of stabbings, of course. This is just how atypical the BBC are being with this. So would they then interject the family as they're crying about having lost a loved one to a tragic stabbing, only to say, "Oh yeah, but this is what the guy who stabbed him actually thought." So just, you know, for balance. No, it doesn't happen, except when they're talking about Israel. Funny that, isn't it? We'll just point out that paragraph there. They do at least acknowledge that Netanyahu and his government, along with most Israelis, believe it's possible to dominate their enemies by pressing onto a military victory. That is, of course, as opposed to ceasefire deals. Netanyahu is actively using force unrestrained by the United States to alter the balance of power in the Middle East in Israel's favour. The tail's wagging the dog, of course, where that's concerned. Jacqueline, great to see you again. Yeah, I think I know the clip that you talked about there. The president gets an 18th century map of the Middle East, and the president is advised he can't hang it in the Oval Office because the map doesn't recognise Palestine, which was, of course, created in 1948 after the Balfour Declaration. It wasn't as though Palestine said, "Hey, why don't you set up a country in our country?" and then start oppressing us for 8 decades. No, that's not the way it went down. Could you imagine if that happened in England or America even? What a time to be alive. Okay, I'm going to move on because I can't stay on too late this evening. Just one other matter I quickly want to talk about. I'm going to try and find an article or something. Just heard about this earlier. Apparently, Jacob Rees-Mogg, is going to be trying his hand at reality television. Slightly similar career move than what Matt Hancock tried recently, if you can call it a career move. I guess it was absolutely appalling. But it's, I guess, going to be one of these reality TV shows you know, that follow a so-called celebrity family around. You know, we've had, not that I watch any of these reality TV shows or whatnot, you know, the Kardashians or the Osbournes or something like that. So let's see if there's anything about that. Because I don't know when this is coming out. I think it's going to be a series, but a sort of fly on the wall thing with Rees-Mogg, who, let's be honest, is as thick as two short planks. The only way he's managed to blag his way into a political career is because of his ridiculous, phony accent that he puts on, and the fact that he, you know, presses his glasses up his nose now and then, and does that thing where that politicians do, where they spread their fingers and sort of tap it together with the hand in front of the chest. You know, that stance, that sort of those sort of trained gestures that they do, and that's it. He's actually pretty thick. He brought out a quote, you know, air quotes, history book, didn't he? Was it about 2 years ago? When the Tories were still in office, and of course it got absolutely trashed by actual historians, because Rees-Mogg has a somewhat fantastical opinion on the history of the UK and the wider world. So let's just go for Rees-Mogg reality series. Meet the Rees-Moggs, it's going to be called. Let's just take a quick look. What do we have? It's going to be on ITV. I think they've got something on the website about it, just bear with. But what's it? Not that I'm going to be watching any of this. My sympathies to anybody who's tempted to dip in for a bit. Oh, and in the picture he's sitting on the couch at home the same way as he lounged across the benches in the House of Commons, that picture where he was having a nap, you'll no doubt remember. Take a look at this, people. Let's see what's happening. There he is. Absolute tit. Meet the Rees-Moggs. I'd rather shit in my hands and clap, to be honest. So this is part of the ad. Do you want to follow an old-fashioned aristocratic family and their servants as they navigate life in their countryside mansion? Well, you could try Downton Abbey, but soon you'll be able to watch Meet the Rees-Moggs. Jacob Rees-Mogg, formerly known as the Minister for the 18th Century, before losing his seat in Parliament, has allowed cameras unprecedented access into his family home for a fly-on-the-wall documentary series. The programme's producers, Discovery, said it's a never-before-seen look into his life at home in the 17th century Somerset house where he lives with his wife and 6 children. I'm just adding my own bit here, and I'm sure that they also practice 17th century values as well. Back to the article. A Discovery spokesperson said following Rees-Mogg through the run-up to the general election and the aftermath that follows, the series will give viewers insight into the political figure who divides opinion as well as the husband and father at home. Spoiler alert, it's not going to end well if it was the run-up to the general election. There he is there. God, what's it going to be? You know, they're going to tend to have stupid hobbies, aren't they, that they don't have. Similar to when Johnson was banging on about making toy model buses from old crates and that sort of thing. Oh no, I hope they don't start going on about the love life. There's the... What a twat. Posing question. He accepts in the documentary trailer that he's been involved in some political controversy, and despite his religious beliefs, even admits, "This is probably a sin. I quite enjoy winding people up." Rees-Mogg, who was the MP for North East Somerset until this year's election, held several senior cabinet roles, but he is possibly best remembered for slouching on the famous green seats in Parliament, a pose he recreated for the series press release. What's that, his signature move now? So he's such a shit lazy MP that his actual trademark thing is slouching while he's half asleep. What a reputation. December 2nd. That's going to be starting there. Don't all rush at once. Look at that house. Did, of course, start getting involved with the stock market from the early age of 12, as it reminds us he first appeared on TV declaring his love for money to a French TV crew. 1982. "I love money, always have done." He says, "Why? Because you need money, and without money, you can and with money you can make more money, because money just keeps going and doesn't run out, does it? The free market will take care of us all, won't it, Jacob?" Remember I said he's not too intelligent. It says, reminds us he was born into money and married into even more when he tied the knot with aristocrat Lady Helena Anne Beatrix Fitzwilliam de Chair. That's Lady Helena Anne Beatrix Fitzwilliam de Chair. Of Chair. What? I didn't even know that. Helena Anne Beatrix Fitzwilliam de Chair. No hyphens. Fitzwilliam de Chair. It's French. In Italian, it's D. Well, in French it's de, I believe. And if their daughter enters public life like he did, oh God, I can't believe this is actually happening. She may also be reminded of what she said in a documentary decades ago. In the trailer for Meet the Rees-Moggs, his daughter Mary asked if the family is posh. He said, "We have quite posh accents. If so, we're being real. We're quite posh, yeah," she tells the documentary with a grin. But they put it all on. Absolutely puts it on. "Oh, Nanny, don't be so rough." So that's it. That's the ITVX article. Like I said, don't all rush at once. Is he going to get another tailor-made suit for the BAFTAs? I don't think he'll need it. You're right there, Octo. He does desperately need a chaise lounge. Yeah, we're quite posh. Yeah. I mean, we do make an effort to sound posh, even though we're not actually speaking the Queen's. It just sounds good to the Americans, you see. Okay, that's enough from the Haunted Pencil. Minister for the 18th century. I will be tying things up very shortly, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters. Please don't go anywhere. Got to give another shout out to the members on the channel. Please do consider joining this list of wonderful comrades here on My Left Eye for just 99 pence. Lots of perks for you to enjoy, so please do check them out as well. I'm going to see if anybody is available to redirect into. have a bit of a raid. Thanks again to Helena at No Justice MTG for the raid earlier as well. So I'm assuming that that's it from her for the evening. There's a Navarra premiere. God, that's not scheduled for a while for the redirect. Any other suggestions? Thanks a lot as well for the All Shorts suggestion on the last live stream. Been checking a bit of that out as well. I was in the excuse me, I was in the chats as we redirected for a bit. I liked it as well. So yeah, very quickly, if you've got any suggestions for where to redirect, any channels I might not have come across, feel free to throw those in. Do also want to thank everybody who's gifted memberships recently as well, of course. That's an awesome way to support the channel, so thanks a lot for those shows of Solidari-Tea. Just going to have another look through the chat before we sign off. Posh Nosh was a good TV show with Richard E. Grant. I don't think I caught any of that. Politics Clive. Posh Nosh. Richard E. Grant. And thanks again for the Palestine flags and watermelons in the chat. Solidarity with Palestine and Lebanon, as always. Okay, assuming there's no one to redirect into, I will call it a close for the evening. Make sure you've hit the thumbs up button before you go. And I'll be catching up with you later on in the week, so please do check out some of the previous content on the channel if you've not done so before. Until we see each other next time, I've been your host Lefty. You've been wonderful. Thanks for joining me tonight. And until next time, take care everyone. My Left, I'll be seeing you soon. Time for the bells. Good night.